They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer mine scalding hot, with a side of public humiliation and a garnish of poetic justice. My name is Dr. Ethan Kessler, and I teach English literature at Portland State University. At 38, I've spent 15 years molding young minds, or at least trying to convince them that Shakespeare wasn't just some dead guy who wrote in fancy language. Most days, I feel like I'm teaching Hamlet to kids who think it's a brand of vape juice. But this story isn't about my students' literary ignorance. It's about betrayal, revenge, and how I systematically destroyed the two people who thought they could humiliate me and get away with it. It started on a Tuesday in October. I remember because I was grading midterm essays on Othello. Ironic, considering what I was about to discover about jealousy and betrayal in my own life. Miranda, my wife of 12 years, had been acting strange for weeks. Late faculty meetings, mysterious phone calls. New lingerie that never seemed intended for me. The classic signs were all there, but I'm an English professor, not a detective. I analyze metaphors, not marriages. Miranda was 35, beautiful in that polished academic way, blonde hair always perfectly styled, designer clothes that screamed, "I'm too good for this small university town." She worked in campus PR, which meant she knew everyone and everyone knew her. We'd met when she was my graduate student, back when such relationships weren't quite as frowned upon as they are now. The first real clue came from Carla, one of Miranda's gossipy friends from the communications department. I overheard her at a faculty mixer, wine-drunk and loud. "Miranda's certainly been enjoying her extracurricular activities," Carla giggled to Bethany, another member of Miranda's inner circle. "Though I have to say, robbing the cradle is quite the power move." "Shh," Bethany hissed, but she was smiling. You know how these academic types love their research projects. They dissolved into laughter, and something cold settled in my stomach. I nursed my bourbon and pretended to be fascinated by a conversation about budget allocations, but my mind was racing. The confirmation came 3 days later, delivered via anonymous Instagram message. No words, just a video file that made my whole body go cold. There was my wife, my Miranda, in my own office, on my desk, with Tyler West. Tyler that West. 23 years old, cocky as heck, and my teaching assistant. The kid I'd been mentoring, the one I'd written recommendation letters for, the one who called me Professor K with that crap-eating grin. In the video, Tyler was shirtless. Miranda's blouse was unbuttoned, and they were going at it like teenagers behind the bleachers. But what made it worse, what made it soul-crushing, was the audio. "God, Tyler, you're so much better than him," Miranda moaned. "Ethan's so boring, so predictable." "Yeah?" Tyler's voice was breathless but smug. "What else? He thinks he's so smart with all his books and theories, but he can't even satisfy his own wife." They laughed together, and I had to pause the video to throw up. I confronted Miranda that night. She was in our bedroom, applying some expensive face cream, humming softly like she didn't have a care in the world. "We need to talk," I said. She looked at me in the mirror, her expression shifting to that practiced innocence she'd perfected over the years. "About what, honey?" I held up my phone. The video paused on a particularly damning frame. Her face went white. "Ethan, I can explain." "Explain what? How you've been sleeping with my student in my office? How you've been laughing about what a pathetic husband I am?" She turned around and I watched her switch tactics in real time. Tears welled up in her eyes. Crocodile tears, I realize now. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "I was confused, lonely. You're always so buried in your work, and Tyler, he made me feel young again." "In my office, Miranda, on my desk. I know it was wrong. Get out." "What?" "Get out of my house. Tonight." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Ethan, you're being dramatic. We can work through this. Couples therapy, maybe." "There is no couple anymore. Pack your crap and get out." She tried to argue, to manipulate, to cry her way back into my good graces, but I was done. 15 years of marriage, and she'd thrown it away for a kid who probably couldn't even spell fidelity. The next morning, I confronted Tyler. He was in the faculty lounge, making coffee with that same cocky grin, like nothing had changed. "Professor K," he said cheerfully, "Hon, how's it going?" "We need to talk. My office, now." His smile faltered slightly, but he followed me. Once the door was closed, I turned to face him. "I know about you and Miranda." Tyler's expression shifted, and for a moment, I thought I saw shame. But then he shrugged, and that smug smirk returned. "Yeah, and? That's all you have to say? Look, Professor, I'm sorry you had to find out like that, but..." He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. Maybe if you'd been taking care of business at home, she wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. The audacity. The sheer absolute audacity. You're my student, Tyler. My teaching assistant. Was, he corrected. I'm withdrawing from your classes. And honestly, Miranda's better off with someone who can actually keep up with her. He stood up, straightening his jacket like he was some kind of businessman instead of a cheating little crap. Guess you finally failed a course, Doc. He walked out, leaving me standing there, shaking with rage and humiliation. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Miranda tried to take me for everything, but I had a good lawyer and evidence of her infidelity. In the end, she got the condo downtown and half our savings. I kept the house and my dignity, what was left of it. The campus gossip mill went into overdrive. In a community as small as ours, secrets don't stay secret long. Within a week, everyone knew that Miranda Kessler had left her professor husband for a student barely old enough to drink legally. The reactions were mixed. Some colleagues offered awkward sympathy. Others seemed to find the whole thing amusing. The worst were the ones who acted like I somehow deserved it, like I was the boring, neglectful husband who drove his wife into the arms of a younger man. Miranda and Tyler didn't help matters by flaunting their relationship. They showed up at campus events together, Tyler's hand possessively on her back. Miranda posted photos on social media, the two of them at restaurants I couldn't afford, at parties I wasn't invited to, looking young and happy and free. Tyler's friends, a collection of fratty business majors and wannabe influencers, made things worse. I overheard them at the campus coffee shop one afternoon, talking loudly enough that half the place could hear. "Dude, Tyler totally scored," one of them said. "Bagging the professor's wife? That's some alpha crap right there." "She's hot too," another added. "Like MILF territory for sure. Tyler said she was all over him. Apparently, the husband was a total dead fish in bed." They erupted in laughter, and I had to leave before I did something I'd regret. The isolation was the worst part. Friends I'd had for years suddenly became unavailable. Dinner invitations dried up. The faculty poker game I'd been part of for a decade quietly continued without me. My only real ally was Alan Reese, a mathematics professor who'd been my friend since we were both junior faculty. Alan was cynical, divorced himself, and had no patience for social niceties. "They're all cowards," he told me over drinks at O'Malley's, the dive bar where we'd taken to meeting weekly. "They don't want to get involved in the drama, so they're freezing you out." "Miranda always was more popular than me," I said, staring into my whiskey. "She's charming, social. I'm just the guy who assigns too much reading." "Forget them," Alan said bluntly, "and forget her. You're better off without a wife who'd cheat with a student." "Tyler's not even a good student," I muttered. "His essays are mediocre at best. No original thoughts, just regurgitated spark notes. Yeah, well, maybe he has other talents." I winced. "Thanks for that image." Alan studied me for a moment. "You know what your problem is, Ethan? You're taking this lying down. They humiliated you and you're just accepting it. What am I supposed to do? Challenge Tyler to a duel? I don't know. But sitting here feeling sorry for yourself isn't working." He was right, but I didn't know what else to do. Until the next week, when Alan dropped a piece of information that changed everything. We were walking across campus after lunch when we passed Tyler and his crew near the student union. Tyler saw me and whispered something to his friends, who all turned to stare and snicker. "A-holes," Alan muttered. "It's fine," I said, but it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. "You know," Alan said thoughtfully, "there's something you should know about your boy Tyler. He's not my boy. Fair enough, but did you know he's been obsessed with Zoe Bishop for years?" I stopped walking. Zoe Bishop? Philosophy PhD candidate. Brilliant, beautiful, completely out of Tyler's league. He's been chasing her since his sophomore year, and she's shot him down every single time. I knew Zoe by reputation. She was something of a campus legend. 25 years old, working on her dissertation about ethics and modern society. I'd seen her around, always with a book, always looking like she was thinking about something more important than whatever was happening around her. "How do you know this?" I asked. "My office is next to the philosophy department lounge. I've overheard Tyler making a fool of himself more than once. Last semester, he actually tried to serenade her with his guitar. Jesus. She told him she'd rather listen to nails on a chalkboard. It's been the talk of the philosophy department ever since." An idea began to form in my mind, a terrible, wonderful idea. Tell me more about Zoe Bishop, I said. Alan grinned. Now you're thinking like a mathematician. Let's go find some data. Zoe Bishop was everything Tyler wasn't. Intelligent, sophisticated, and completely unimpressed by the kind of juvenile charm that had apparently worked on my ex-wife. I first approached her at the campus bookstore, where she was browsing the philosophy section with the focused intensity of a scholar. She was beautiful, but not in Miranda's polished, artificial way. Zoe had dark hair that looked like she'd run her fingers through it while thinking, brown eyes that seemed to see right through you, and the kind of natural elegance that couldn't be bought or faked. Excuse me, I said, approaching carefully. You're Zoe Bishop, right? I'm Dr. Kessler from the English department. She looked up from a copy of Nietzsche, studying me with obvious curiosity. I know who you are. I've heard good things about your Victorian literature course, and I've heard impressive things about your work on moral philosophy. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Flattery, Dr. Kessler? Just truth, and please call me Ethan. We talked for 20 minutes about books, philosophy, and the sorry state of undergraduate education. She was sharp, funny, and refreshingly honest about the pretensions of academic life. Half the graduate students in my department think they're the next Socrates, she said. They use big words to say small things and act like they've discovered fire. I know the type. I have a few in my classes. Oh, I bet you do. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. I heard Tyler West was one of your TAs. My stomach tightened. You know Tyler? Unfortunately, he's been persistent in his attentions for the past few years. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. It's actually quite entertaining. Last month, he tried to impress me by quoting Descartes. He pronounced it Descartes and got the quote completely wrong. I laughed despite myself. That sounds like Tyler. I assume you've heard about his recent conquest. She said the word with obvious distaste. My ex-wife. Yes. Zoe's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, that must have been difficult. It was, but I'm learning that some people aren't worth the pain they cause. Wise words. I took a breath, knowing I was about to cross a line. Would you like to get coffee sometime? I promised to pronounce all the philosophers' names correctly. She studied me for a long moment, and I wondered if she could see through my motives. But then she smiled. I'd like that, but fair warning. I have very strong opinions about Kant. I wouldn't expect anything less. Our first coffee date turned into 3 hours of conversation. Zoe was everything I'd forgotten I wanted in a partner. Intelligent, curious, challenging. She didn't just listen to my thoughts. She built on them, argued with them, made them better. You're not what I expected, she said as we walked across campus afterward. What did you expect? Someone bitter, broken maybe. The wronged husband nursing his wounds. Maybe I am those things. No, she said confidently. You're angry, which is different. Anger can be productive if you channel it correctly. She was right, of course. I was angry, furious actually. But talking to Zoe, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine excitement about another person. We started seeing each other regularly. Coffee dates became dinner dates. Dinner dates became long walks and longer conversations. For the first time since my marriage imploded, I felt like myself again. The physical attraction was undeniable, but it was the intellectual connection that really drew me in. Zoe challenged me in ways Miranda never had. She made me think, made me laugh, made me remember why I'd fallen in love with literature and ideas in the first place. 3 weeks into our relationship, she stayed over for the first time. We made love with a passion and tenderness that made me realize how dead my marriage had been long before Miranda's affair. Afterward, as we lay in bed talking about everything and nothing, Zoe said something that stopped me cold. Tyler's going to lose his mind when he finds out about us. Is that why you're here? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She turned to face me, her expression serious. At first, maybe a little. I won't lie. The idea of Tyler's reaction was appealing. But that's not why I'm still here. Why are you still here? Because you're the first man I've met in years who treats me like an intellectual equal instead of a conquest. Because you make me laugh. Because you're kind and smart, and you don't try to impress me with BS. She paused, running her fingers along my chest. And because I think you might be falling in love with me for the right reasons, even if you started this for the wrong ones. I couldn't deny it. I was falling in love with her, hard and fast and completely. But she was right about my motivations, too. Part of me, a significant part, was thrilled by the idea of Tyler's reaction when he discovered that the woman he'd been obsessing over was now with the man he'd humiliated. "You're very perceptive," I said. "It's my job, but Ethan, yeah, whatever your reasons for starting this, make sure you know what you want it to become. Because I'm not interested in being anyone's revenge fantasy." "You're not," I said, and meant it. "You're so much more than that." 2 days later, Tyler saw us together. We were having lunch at the campus cafe when he walked in with Miranda and his usual crew of idiots. I saw him spot us immediately. His face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical if they weren't so satisfying. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that looked like physical pain. Zoe, who had her back to them, noticed my expression. "They're here, aren't they? Tyler and Miranda. Don't look." "I don't need to. I can practically feel his stare burning holes in the back of my head." She reached across the table and took my hand, lacing our fingers together. The gesture was natural, affectionate, and perfectly visible to anyone watching. "Let's give them something to really stare at," she said, and leaned across the table to kiss me. It was a soft, sweet kiss that tasted like coffee and promises. When we broke apart, I glanced over at Tyler's table. He was staring at us with raw fury, his hands clenched into fists. Miranda looked confused and maybe a little hurt. "How do you think that went?" Zoe asked innocently. I said. "That was just the opening move." The campus grapevine is more efficient than any news network, and word of my relationship with Zoe spread like wildfire. By the end of the week, everyone knew that the betrayed English professor was dating the philosophy department's rising star, the same woman who'd been publicly rejecting Tyler West for years. I decided to lean into it. I updated my Facebook relationship status for the first time in years, posting a photo of Zoe and me at Powell's Books, both of us laughing at something she'd just said. The caption read, "Sometimes the best chapters come after you think the story's over." Within hours, the post had dozens of likes and comments from colleagues I hadn't heard from in months. But more importantly, I knew Tyler would see it. Miranda, too. Zoe, for her part, seemed to enjoy the attention. She posted her own photos. Us at a wine tasting, walking through the Japanese garden, having dinner at a restaurant that was definitely above my usual budget but worth every penny to see the look on Tyler's face when the photos went live. "You know," she said one evening as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen, "I think I'm starting to understand the appeal of social media. It's like performance art, but pettier. Having second thoughts about dating the vengeful ex-husband? Are you kidding? This is the most fun I've had in years." She wasn't wrong. For the first time since my marriage ended, I felt like I was winning at something. The real test came at the faculty Halloween party. It was one of those mandatory social events that everyone attended and no one enjoyed, held in the university's grand ballroom with cheap wine and cheaper decorations. Zoe and I arrived fashionably late, her in a stunning black dress that made every head in the room turn. She'd suggested we go as literary characters. She was Lady Macbeth to my Hamlet, a choice that wasn't lost on anyone who knew their Shakespeare. "Ambitious," she'd said when she suggested it. "I like ambitious." We made our entrance, and I watched the room's dynamics shift. Conversations paused. Eyes followed us. The wronged husband and his brilliant, beautiful new girlfriend. We were the evening's entertainment, whether we wanted to be or not. Miranda was there, of course, hanging on Tyler's arm like a life preserver. She'd dressed as some generic flirty cat, all black leather and obvious desperation. Tyler was a pirate, which seemed appropriate for someone who specialized in taking things that didn't belong to him. "They're staring," Zoe murmured in my ear. "Let them." We worked the room like politicians, stopping to chat with colleagues, accepting congratulations on our relationship, playing the part of the happy couple. Which wasn't hard, because we were happy. The revenge was just a bonus. The confrontation came inevitably at the bar. I was getting drinks for Zoe and myself when Tyler appeared beside me, already several drinks deep and radiating hostility. "Ethan," he said, his voice slurred just enough to be noticeable. "Tyler. Enjoying yourself?" "Very much. You?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you're so self-satisfied, don't you?" "I think I'm a man having drinks with his girlfriend at a faculty party. Nothing particularly clever about that." "Your girlfriend." He practically spat the words. Do you have any idea how long I've been trying to get Zoe's attention? I'm aware of your persistence. 3 years, Ethan. 3 long years I've been harassing her, I suggested mildly. Because that's what she calls it. His face flushed red. She's using you, to get back at me for whatever she thinks I did wrong. Is that what you tell yourself? That the only reason a woman like Zoe would reject you is to spite you somehow? I turned to face him fully, abandoning any pretense of politeness. Here's a thought, Tyler. Maybe she rejected you because you're an immature, entitled little boy who thinks persistence is the same thing as charm. Maybe she's with me because I treat her like an equal instead of a prize to be won. Screw you, he snarled. You already did that when you slept with my wife. How's that working out for you, by the way? I glanced across the room to where Miranda was standing alone, watching our conversation with obvious anxiety. Her cat costume looked cheap under the ballroom lights, and she had the desperate look of someone who was beginning to realize she'd made a terrible mistake. Miranda looks a little insecure tonight, I continued conversationally. I wonder why that is. Could it be that she's starting to figure out she left a tenured professor with a house and a retirement plan for a student with no job prospects and an obsession with another woman? Tyler's hands clenched into fists. You son of a witch. Careful, Tyler. Wouldn't want to fail at life as hard as you failed Intro to Ethics. It was a low blow. Tyler had actually failed my ethics course his sophomore year, but I was past caring about playing fair. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me. But then Zoe appeared at my side, sliding her arm around my waist with practiced ease. Everything okay here? She asked sweetly. Tyler's rage crumbled into something that looked almost like pain. Zoe, Tyler. Her voice was ice cold. I thought I made myself clear the last time we spoke. I'm not interested, I've never been interested, and I certainly won't be interested now that you're dating someone else. She looked him up and down with obvious disdain. Although I have to say, the whole homewrecker look doesn't really suit you. Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He looked between Zoe and me, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Enjoy your evening, Zoe said dismissively, then turned to me. Shall we dance? We left Tyler standing at the bar, holding his drink and looking like someone had just explained calculus to a toddler. On the dance floor, Zoe pulled me close, her body warm against mine. That was cruel, she said. But she was smiling. He deserved it. Oh, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure you knew what you were doing. What am I doing? Destroying him systematically and publicly. It's actually quite impressive. She was right. Tyler's humiliation at the party became the talk of campus within days. Someone had recorded part of our conversation on their phone, and by Monday morning, the video was making the rounds on social media. But Tyler wasn't done yet, and neither was I. Tyler's retaliation came 2 weeks later, and it was exactly as pathetic as I'd expected. He tried to file a harassment complaint against me with the university administration, claiming I was using my position to intimidate him and interfere with his relationship with Miranda. The complaint was a masterwork of projection and self-pity, painting himself as the victim of a vindictive professor who couldn't handle being outcompeted by a younger man. Dean Lutz called me into his office on a gray November morning, his expression carefully neutral. Ethan, we need to discuss this complaint Tyler West has filed. I'd been expecting this. What exactly is he claiming? He says you've been harassing him at social events, making threatening statements, and using your relationship with Ms. Bishop to humiliate him publicly. And what do you think of these claims? Dean Lutz leaned back in his chair, studying me. I think Tyler West is a mediocre student who made some very poor choices and is now dealing with the consequences. But I also think you're walking a fine line here, Ethan. I haven't done anything inappropriate or unethical. No, you haven't. But you're also not exactly taking the high road. He was right, of course, but I was past caring about the high road. Is there anything specific you need me to address? Just be careful. Tyler's complaint won't go anywhere. There's no evidence of actual harassment, and frankly, his credibility is ruined after the affair situation. But don't give him any ammunition. I nodded and left his office, but I wasn't worried about Tyler's complaint. I was thinking about something else entirely. That afternoon, I met with Alan at our usual spot. He was grinning like a cat with a canary. You look pleased with yourself, I said. Oh, I am. I have a gift for you. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a video. Tyler, drunk at some off-campus party, ranting to his friends about Zoe. She thinks she's so ridiculously smart, Tyler slurred in the video. But she's just a stuck-up snob who doesn't know what she's missing. I could show her things that boring old professor never could. Dude, maybe you should let it go, one of his friends said. Let it go? I've been dreaming about that girl for 3 years. She's perfect, man. Perfect body, perfect face. I used to fantasize about her every night. Still do, even with Miranda around. The video went on for another minute, Tyler describing his obsession with Zoe in increasingly graphic and disturbing detail. It was exactly the kind of evidence I needed. Where did you get this? I asked. Tyler's roommate posted it on his Instagram story last weekend. Thought it was funny, apparently. I screenshotted it before he took it down. This is perfect. I thought you might think so. What are you going to do with it? I was already formulating a plan. Something poetic. The next phase of my revenge required careful timing. I waited until the following week when the university was hosting its annual academic showcase, a formal event where graduate students presented their research to faculty and potential donors. Zoe was presenting her dissertation work, and she looked absolutely stunning in a navy blue dress that highlighted her intelligence as much as her beauty. I watched from the audience as she fielded questions from professors and donors, handling each inquiry with grace and sophistication. Tyler was there too, lurking near the back of the room with Miranda. I could see him watching Zoe with that same hungry expression from the video. After Zoe's presentation, there was a reception in the university's main hall. It was exactly the kind of high-profile event where reputations were made and broken. I waited until Tyler had a few drinks in him and was holding court with his usual crowd of admirers. Then I made my move. Tyler, I said, approaching with my phone in hand, I have something I think you'll find interesting. He looked wary, but curious. Yeah, what's that? Without a word, I hit play on the video Alan had given me. Tyler's drunken confession filled the space between us, his voice carrying just far enough for the people nearby to hear. His face went white as he realized what was happening. Where did you get that? He hissed. Does it matter? What matters is what people think of it. I'd already sent copies to several key faculty members, including Dean Lutz and the head of the philosophy department. I'd also forwarded it to Zoe's dissertation advisor, with a note expressing concern about a student who seemed to be obsessing over one of their graduate students. You're insane, Tyler said, but his voice was shaking. No, Tyler, I'm thorough. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, Tyler was called into meetings with university administration. His teaching assistant positions were quietly revoked. Several professors who had been considering him for research opportunities suddenly became unavailable. But the real damage was social. The video somehow found its way onto social media. Tyler's own words describing his obsession with Zoe in graphic detail while openly admitting he was still fantasizing about her despite being with Miranda made him a campus pariah overnight. Miranda, who had been tagged in several posts about the video, was humiliated. She confronted Tyler publicly in the student union, screaming at him about his sick obsession, while dozens of students recorded the whole thing on their phones. 3 years? She shouted. You've been obsessing over her for 3 years? Even while you were with me? Tyler tried to explain, to minimize, to deflect. But the damage was done. Miranda stormed out, and by evening her social media was scrubbed clean of any photos with Tyler. I found out later that she'd moved back in with her parents in Seattle. Apparently, the condo I'd helped pay for was too expensive for her PR salary alone. Tyler, meanwhile, had become a joke. Students whispered about him in hallways. Faculty avoided him. His friends, embarrassed by the association, gradually stopped including him in their activities. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Spring semester brought unexpected news. Zoe and I were engaged. I'd proposed on Valentine's Day in the campus rose garden where we'd had our first real conversation about literature and philosophy. It was sentimental and romantic and absolutely genuine. Whatever revenge fantasies had brought us together, what we had now was real love. Zoe said yes with tears in her eyes and a smile that lit up her entire face. Are you sure you're ready for this? She asked afterward, her engagement ring catching the afternoon sunlight. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Even knowing that marrying me is going to completely destroy what's left of Tyler's sanity, especially knowing that. We announced our engagement on social media with a photo of us kissing in the rose garden, her ring prominently displayed. The response was overwhelming. Congratulations from colleagues, friends, and students who had watched our relationship develop over the past months. But the responses I was most interested in came from Tyler and Miranda. Miranda's comment was brief and bitter. How quickly we move on. Tyler didn't comment at all, but according to Alan, who had sources everywhere, he'd been seen drinking alone at several campus bars, muttering about those professors and stolen dreams. Planning the wedding became an exercise in strategic thinking. We decided on a ceremony in the university's historic chapel, followed by a reception in the grand ballroom where we'd first appeared together at the Halloween party. It was symbolic, poetic, and guaranteed to be the social event of the academic year. We sent invitations to everyone, and I mean everyone, faculty, staff, graduate students, even some undergraduates who had been particularly engaged in my classes. The guest list was comprehensive and deliberate. We did not, however, send invitations to Tyler West or Miranda Kessler, which is why I was surprised when they showed up anyway. The ceremony was perfect. Zoe looked absolutely radiant in a vintage-inspired gown that made her look like a goddess. I managed not to cry during my vows, though it was a close thing. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the chapel erupted in applause. We were taking photos in the Rose Garden when Tyler and Miranda appeared. They looked terrible. Tyler was drunk, not falling down drunk, but obviously impaired. His suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked. Miranda looked like she'd been crying, her makeup smudged and her hair disheveled. "Congratulations," Tyler said loudly, his voice carrying across the garden. Several guests turned to stare. "Tyler," I said calmly. "Miranda, I don't believe you were invited." "Invited?" Tyler laughed bitterly. "To watch you parade around with your what?" Zoe interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. "I was never yours, Tyler. I was never even interested in being yours." "You don't understand," Tyler said, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. "We had something. All those conversations, all those times I told you no," Zoe finished. "All those times I made it clear I wasn't interested. All those times you refused to listen." Miranda stepped forward, her face twisted with anger and hurt. "You think you've won something?" She spat at me. "You think marrying some graduate student makes you better than me?" "I think," I said quietly, "that I married a woman who loves me, a woman who respects me, a woman who would never betray me with a student barely old enough to drink." The words hit their mark. Miranda flinched like I'd slapped her. "You were always so incredibly sanctimonious," she said, "so superior. Maybe if you'd paid half as much attention to me as you do to your precious books, maybe if you'd had half the integrity of my precious books, we'd still be married," I replied. Tyler stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "You son of a witch. You stole her from me." "I didn't steal anything," I said. "I simply offered her something you never could." "Yeah, what's that?" I looked at Zoe, my brilliant, beautiful wife, and smiled. Respect. What happened next was captured on dozens of phones and would become campus legend. Tyler, drunk and furious, and finally pushed past his breaking point, lunged at me. But he was unsteady on his feet, and I sidestepped easily. His momentum carried him forward, directly into the three-tiered wedding cake that had been set up for photos. The cake exploded in a shower of frosting and fondant flowers. Tyler went down hard, landing face first in what had been the bottom layer, covered head to toe in white icing and raspberry filling. The garden fell silent for a moment. Then someone started laughing. Then someone else. Within seconds, the entire crowd was roaring with laughter as Tyler struggled to get up, cake dripping from his hair and clothes. "Oh my God," Zoe whispered. And then she started laughing too. Deep, genuine laughter that was infectious and joyful. Miranda tried to help Tyler up, but he pushed her away, humiliated and furious. Frosting flew from his hands, splattering her dress. "Tyler, stop," she began. "Forget this," he snarled, and stormed off toward the parking lot, leaving a trail of cake crumbs behind him. Miranda looked around at the crowd of laughing guests, her face crumpling with embarrassment. She followed Tyler, practically running to escape the scene. I turned to Zoe, who was still laughing, tears streaming down her face. "Well," I said, "that was unexpected." "That was perfect," she corrected, pulling me close for a kiss that tasted like victory and vanilla frosting. The reception that followed was legendary. Everyone wanted to talk about Tyler's dramatic exit, the cake incident, The sheer audacity of crashing someone's wedding. But more than that, they wanted to celebrate Zoe and me, the professor who had found love after betrayal, the graduate student who had chosen wisdom over youth. We danced until midnight, surrounded by friends and colleagues who had watched our love story unfold. When we finally left for our honeymoon in Italy, the last thing I saw was Alan raising a toast to the best revenge plot in academic history. 6 months later, I heard through the campus grapevine that Tyler had dropped out of graduate school and moved back to his parents' house in suburban Denver. Miranda had taken a job at a community college in Eastern Oregon, as far from Portland as she could get while staying in the state. As for Zoe and me, we bought a house near campus with a library that spans 2 rooms and a garden where we grow vegetables and argue about Nietzsche. She finished her dissertation and got a tenure track position at Reed College. I'm up for department chair next year. Sometimes late at night when we're reading in bed together, Zoe will look up from her book and smile at me. "Do you ever regret it?" she'll ask. The way we got together, I mean. And I always tell her the same thing. I regret that it took betrayal to bring us together, but I don't regret a single moment since. Because the truth is, Tyler and Miranda did me the greatest favor of my life when they destroyed my marriage. They freed me to find something real, something better, something that began with revenge but became the greatest love story I've ever been part of. They thought they were writing my ending. Instead, they gave me the perfect beginning. And that, students, concludes today's lesson.